7-day Caribbean cruise, 2 connecting suites, champagne package. The email confirmation glowed on our shared iPad screen, illuminating my face in the darkness of our bedroom. Mark had forgotten to log out of his email again. My husband of 12 years was meticulous about most things, but technology often escaped him. My name is Pamela Winters, a 38-year-old high school English teacher from Boston. Mark and I had built what I thought was a comfortable life together. A charming colonial in the suburbs, satisfying careers, he as a financial advisor, and a close circle of friends. No children, though not for lack of trying in our early years. We'd settled into a rhythm that felt safe, if not occasionally predictable. I stared at the cruise confirmation, confusion washing over me. Our anniversary was months away, and Mark hadn't mentioned any vacation plans. The booking was for next month, during the school year when I couldn't possibly take time off. And why 2 suites? The recipient's name caught my eye, Mark Winters and Andrew Peterson. Andrew was Mark's college roommate who now lived in Chicago. They'd remained close over the years, meeting up for occasional fishing trips or sporting events. But a luxury cruise seemed strange for 2 middle-aged men, who typically preferred watching football and drinking beer. I scrolled down looking for more details. The payment had been made from our joint account, $6,800 for the premium package. My stomach tightened. That was a significant amount to spend without discussion, especially with the kitchen renovation we'd been saving for. I was about to close the iPad when a text notification appeared at the top of the screen. Andrew. Can't wait for our getaway. Ella's excited too. She's never been on a cruise before. Yeah? Who was Ella? I quickly opened Mark's messages. The conversation with Andrew went back months, with references to next month's trip and the girls. My confusion morphed into something darker as I scrolled through the exchange. Andrew. Jessica keeps asking questions about our guys' trip. Getting harder to dodge. Mark. Same with Pamela. Stick to the story. Chicago conference, boring financial stuff. She never asks details about work. My hands trembled. Chicago conference? Mark had told me 2 weeks ago he'd be attending a financial advisors conference in Chicago next month. 3 days, very routine, nothing interesting enough to mention. Except apparently it was actually a 7-day Caribbean cruise with Andrew and women named Ella and Jessica. I heard the garage door opening downstairs. Mark was home from his late client meeting. I quickly closed the messages, put the iPad to sleep, and slipped back to my side of the bed. My mind raced with questions and possibilities, none of them innocent. I listened to Mark's familiar routine. Keys on the hook, briefcase by the door, shoes off. The refrigerator opened and closed. He was having his usual post-work beer. Such normal sounds from a man who was apparently living a life I knew nothing about. Pam. You still up? He called from the bottom of the stairs. Just reading. I responded, surprised at how normal my voice sounded when everything inside me was screaming. He appeared in the doorway minutes later, loosening his tie. Mark was still handsome at 40, salt and pepper hair, athletic build maintained through weekend tennis matches, smile lines that had attracted me from the beginning. I searched his face for signs of deception, but saw only the familiar features I'd woken up to for 12 years. How was your day? He asked, heading to the bathroom to wash up. Interesting, I replied truthfully. Yours? Exhausting. The Henderson account is a mess. Another lie, or just the usual one? I couldn't tell anymore. As Mark showered, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront him tonight. I needed more information, more evidence before showing my hand. But I also wouldn't sit by and be made a fool. I picked up my phone and texted my best friend Diane. Need to talk. Emergency. Coffee tomorrow before work. Her response was immediate. Of course. 6:30 at Bluebird Cafe. Everything okay? I stared at her message, unsure how to respond. Was anything okay? My husband was planning a secret vacation with another woman. The safe, predictable life I thought we shared was apparently built on lies. We'll explain tomorrow. I wrote back, then deleted the message. Found something on Mark's iPad. He's planning a cruise with another woman. When Mark emerged from the bathroom, I pretended to be engrossed in my novel. He slid into bed beside me, leaned over to kiss my cheek, and whispered, "Don't stay up too late, hon." I mumbled something non-committal, maintaining my facade while mentally cataloging every detail of our shared bank accounts, travel documents, and schedule for the coming weeks. If Mark thought he could simply sail away with his friend, he was about to discover his wife was not the unobservant, compliant woman he clearly took her for. What Mark didn't realize as he drifted off to sleep beside me was that I'd already forwarded his entire email exchange with Andrew to myself, including the cruise booking confirmation with all its details. Ship name, departure date, cabin numbers. Everything I would need to orchestrate the surprise of his life. A cruise. Diane set down her coffee cup with more force than necessary. With another woman? Are you absolutely sure? We sat in a corner booth at Bluebird Cafe, the morning rush still an hour away. Diane, my closest friend since college, had arrived early with a worry line etched between her eyebrows. "The evidence is pretty damning," I said, showing her the screenshots I'd taken. "He's been lying about this trip for weeks. It's not a conference in Chicago, it's a Caribbean cruise with Andrew and two women named Ella and Jessica." "Who the hell is Ella?" Diane demanded, scrolling through the messages with increasing indignation. "I have no idea." I searched her name in his contacts and emails, but found nothing else. I took a sip of my rapidly cooling coffee. Last night I checked our credit card statements going back 6 months. There are charges at restaurants on nights he claimed to be working late. Jewelry stores where I never received gifts. A hotel in Providence 3 weeks ago when he said he was at a seminar. Diane's expression shifted from concern to cold fury. "That lying bastard. What are you going to do?" It was the question I'd been asking myself all night as I lay awake beside my softly snoring husband. Confront him? Serve him divorce papers? Cry and beg for explanations? "I'm going on that cruise," I said, voicing the decision I'd made somewhere around 3 a.m. "I booked a cabin this morning." Diane's eyes widened. "You're not serious?" "Completely serious." I pulled up the confirmation email on my phone. I used my personal savings. I'm on the same ship, same departure date. I want to see his face when he realizes I'm there. I want to meet Ella. "Pamela." Diane hesitated, concern evident in her voice. "That sounds crazy, desperate, pathetic." I supplied. "I was going to say dangerous for your mental health. Do you really want to see them together? Why put yourself through that?" I understood her concern. Diane had been through a messy divorce 3 years earlier when her ex-husband left her for his personal trainer. She knew the pain of betrayal firsthand. "I need to see it with my own eyes," I explained. "Otherwise, there will always be a part of me wondering if I misunderstood. If there was an innocent explanation I didn't consider. And if you do see them together? What then?" I hadn't planned that far ahead. "I don't know yet. But I'll be making that decision from a position of certainty, not doubt." Diane sighed, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Then I'm coming with you." "What? No, you can't." "I absolutely can. My client deadline ends next week, and I have vacation days to burn." Diane was a graphic designer who worked primarily from home, giving her flexible scheduling. "You shouldn't face this alone." Tears pricked at my eyes for the first time since discovering the emails. "Are you sure?" 100%. "We'll get adjoining cabins. I'll be your emotional support human." Her expression softened. "Plus, someone needs to physically restrain you from pushing him overboard." Despite everything, I laughed. That would be the simple solution. Too simple. Prison orange isn't your color. Diane's tone turned serious again. "What about until the cruise? Are you going to confront him?" I shook my head. "I'm going to play along. Let him think his Chicago conference story is working. Meanwhile, I'll be watching his every move and gathering more information." "The perfect crime," Diane nodded approvingly. "It's not a crime to investigate your own husband's deception," I pointed out. "No, but what you might do when you catch him red-handed could be." Over the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life that rivaled Mark's. Outwardly, I maintained our normal routine. Teaching my classes, preparing meals, watching our usual shows. I asked appropriate questions about his upcoming conference. nodding sympathetically when he complained about having to prepare presentations. Behind this facade of normalcy, I was meticulously preparing for the confrontation to come. I consulted discreetly with a divorce attorney, documenting Mark's suspicious expenditures and gathering financial records. I researched the cruise ship's layout, memorizing deck plans and restaurant locations. I even bought new clothes, items more stylish and confident than my usual practical wardrobe. "You should get your hair done too," Diane suggested during one of our planning sessions at her apartment. Really shock him with the full transformation. I touched my shoulder-length brown hair, which I'd worn in the same style for years. "You think?" "Absolutely. If you're going to confront your cheating husband on a luxury cruise ship, you might as well look spectacular doing it." 2 days later, I emerged from an upscale salon with a shorter, more sophisticated cut with subtle highlights. The stylist had also demonstrated makeup techniques that emphasized my green eyes and cheekbones. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized the confident woman staring back at me. Mark noticed immediately when I arrived home. "Wow, your hair looks great. What prompted the change?" "Just felt like something new," I replied with a casual shrug. "The end of the school year always makes me reflective." "It really suits you," he said, kissing my cheek before returning to the sports highlights on TV. I studied him, wondering how he could compliment me so genuinely while planning to betray me just weeks later. Had our entire marriage been this performance of affection masking indifference? Or had something changed along the way? The night before Mark's departure, he packed his suitcase while I sat on our bed watching. Each carefully folded item represented another lie. Casual clothes for a business conference, swimming trunks for hotel pools that wouldn't be used, a new pair of sunglasses perfect for Caribbean sunshine. "Remember to pack sunscreen," I suggested innocently. The weather report for Chicago mentioned unusually warm temperatures. Mark hesitated almost imperceptibly before responding. "Good thinking. Don't want to come back sunburned from sitting in conference rooms all day." "Exactly," I agreed, maintaining my supportive wife's smile while mentally adding another lie to the tally. That night, he held me closer than usual, his body tense against mine. Was it guilt? Excitement for his upcoming tryst? I lay rigid in his arms, my mind racing with questions I couldn't ask yet. "I'll miss you," he whispered into the darkness. The words pierced something deep within me. Even now, on the eve of his betrayal, some part of me ached at his absence, at the loss of the man I thought he was. "Will you?" I asked softly. He propped himself up on one elbow, his face barely visible in the dim light. "Of course I will." "Why would you ask that?" "Because you're leaving me for a luxury cruise with another woman," I thought. "Because our entire marriage might be a lie. Because I don't know who you are anymore." "No reason," I said instead. "Just feeling a little insecure, I guess." He pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "You have nothing to be insecure about. You're everything to me." I closed my eyes, allowing myself one final moment of pretense, of believing in the marriage we'd built. Tomorrow, Mark would leave for the port in New York, thinking he was embarking on a secret getaway. 3 hours later, Diane and I would follow, our own suitcases packed for confrontation rather than romance. What Mark didn't know as he drifted to sleep, mentally already on his way to meet Ella, was that I had upgraded my cruise booking to a suite directly across from his. While he imagined a week of freedom and deception, I was preparing for the moment that would either end our marriage or force us to rebuild it from its foundation. And I was no longer certain which outcome I preferred. The Ocean Majesty lived up to its name, 18 decks of floating luxury preparing to carry 3,800 passengers through the Caribbean. I stood on the dock beside Diane, watching the massive ship tower above us, its white hull gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Diane asked, squeezing my arm reassuringly. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. Somewhere aboard that floating city, Mark and his companion were settling into their premium suite, perhaps already celebrating their escape from ordinary life. From me, we joined the embarkation queue, our boarding passes and passports ready. I wore large sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, an insufficient disguise perhaps, but enough to avoid immediate recognition in the crowded terminal. My hands trembled slightly as I handed my documents to the smiling cruise employee. Welcome aboard the Ocean Majesty, Ms. Wilson. You're in Suite 9235 on the Dolphin deck. I'd booked under my maiden name as an extra precaution, though the chances of Mark seeing the passenger manifest seemed slim. Diane and I had connecting suites on the deck directly above Mark's, providing easy access while maintaining a separate sanctuary if things went badly. The ship was overwhelming, a maze of restaurants, pools, theaters, and lounges. Crew members directed new arrivals with practiced efficiency. Champagne flutes offered as welcome gifts. I declined mine, needing clarity more than celebration. We should drop our bags and do reconnaissance, Diane suggested once we reached our suites. Find their cabin location, check out the dining venues, establish the territory. I smiled despite my anxiety. This isn't a military operation. Isn't it though? She raised an eyebrow. Enemy combatants, strategic positioning, intelligence gathering? Sounds like warfare to me. Our suites were luxurious, spacious rooms with private balconies overlooking the ocean, king-size beds, and marble bathrooms. Under different circumstances, I would have been thrilled with the accommodations. Now, I barely noticed the amenities, my mind fixed on the confrontation to come. After freshening up, we ventured out to explore. According to the booking confirmation I'd seen, Mark and Andrew had connecting suites on the Aloha deck, one level below us. We took the glass elevator down, casually strolling past their cabin location. The corridors were busy with arriving passengers, luggage being delivered, excited voices calling out cabin numbers. Should we wait and try to spot them? Diane asked as we passed Suite 8342, Mark's assigned room. I shook my head. Not yet. I don't want our first encounter to be in a hallway. I need to see them together, to understand exactly what we're dealing with. We continued our exploration, familiarizing ourselves with the ship's layout. The Ocean Majesty offered multiple dining options, from casual buffets to elegant specialty restaurants. There were theaters, nightclubs, a casino, and various pools and hot tubs scattered throughout the upper decks. So many potential locations for an encounter. The muster drill is at 4 o'clock, Diane noted, checking the daily program left in our suites. All passengers are required to attend. We could spot them there. Too crowded, too regimented, I replied. I was thinking of the sail-away party on the main pool deck at 5 o'clock. It's festive, people will be distracted, and there's enough space to observe without being immediately noticed. Diane nodded approvingly. Good tactical thinking. Plus, if you decide to push him overboard after all, there will be plenty of witnesses to your innocent location across the deck. Your confidence in my restraint is touching. We returned to our suites to change for the sail-away party. I selected a sundress I'd purchased specifically for this trip. A vibrant blue that complemented my new hairstyle, more stylish than anything Mark was accustomed to seeing me wear. Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. Was that the point? To become someone new when the foundation of my identity, wife, partner, believer in our shared future, had been shattered? At 4:45, we headed to the main pool deck, already crowded with excited passengers. A calypso band played tropical music while bartenders prepared colorful cocktails. We found a strategic spot near the central bar with good sight lines to all entrances, ordering non-alcoholic drinks to maintain clarity. What exactly is your plan when you see them? Diane asked, scanning the growing crowd. Immediate confrontation? Subtile surveillance? Dramatic reveal? I'd been asking myself the same question for weeks. I think I'll know when I see them. It depends on what I'm seeing, how they are together, whether there's any pretense of them being just friends. The ship's horn sounded, announcing our imminent departure. The crowd cheered as the band increased their tempo. I sipped my virgin piña colada, eyes constantly moving across the festive scene. And then I saw him. Mark emerged from the port side entrance, wearing linen shorts and a blue button-down shirt I'd never seen before. He looked relaxed, younger somehow, his face animated as he spoke to the woman beside him. Ella, presumably. She was stunning, tall and willowy with long dark hair, wearing a flowing sundress that emphasized her graceful figure. Perhaps 30, significantly younger than Mark's 40 years. My stomach clenched as I watched them navigate through the crowd. Mark's hand resting casually on the small of her back in a gesture of familiar intimacy. They stopped at the starboard bar, where Andrew and another woman, Jessica I assumed, greeted them enthusiastically. There they are, I whispered to Diane, who followed my gaze. Oh my God, she muttered. Is that his hand on her waist? The audacity. I couldn't speak, transfixed by the tableau across the deck. The four of them laughed together, toasting with champagne flutes as the ship slowly pulled away from the dock. They looked like two ordinary couples celebrating the beginning of a vacation. Comfortable, affectionate, legitimate. I can't breathe, I realized suddenly, my chest constricting painfully. I can't. Diane gripped my elbow firmly. Yes, you can. Breathe, Pamela. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. The ship's horn blasted again as we cleared the harbor, eliciting more cheers from the crowd. Across the deck, Mark pulled Ella closer, saying something in her ear that made her laugh. Then to my horror he kissed her. Not a friendly peck, but a lingering kiss that spoke of established intimacy. That's it. I'm going over there right now, Diane declared, her protective instincts flaring. No. I grabbed her arm, surprising myself with my steadiness. The initial shock was receding, replaced by a cold clarity. Not yet. I need to see more. Understand more. For the next hour, we observed them from a distance as they enjoyed the sail-away festivities. Their body language told a story of comfortable familiarity, casual touches, inside jokes, the unconscious mirroring of longtime couples. This was not a first assignation or a casual fling. Whatever relationship existed between Mark and Ella had history, depth, routine. When they eventually left the pool deck, heading toward one of the specialty restaurants, we followed at a discreet distance. They were seated at a window table with a spectacular view of the sunset over the ocean. A romantic setting for what appeared to be a celebration of some kind. We need to hear what they're saying, I murmured, frustration mounting as we lurked near the restaurant entrance. Leave it to me, Diane said, approaching the maitre d' with a confident smile. Minutes later, she returned triumphant. We have a table across the room, angled perfectly to observe without being obvious. Once seated, we ordered minimally, our attention focused on the foursome by the window. They were animated, glasses raised in multiple toasts. I strained to hear their conversation over the restaurant's ambient noise. Can't believe we finally made it happen, Mark was saying, his voice carrying during a momentary lull in the background chatter. After all this time. Ella beamed at him, her hand covering his on the table. Worth the wait. Worth all of it. Andrew raised his glass again. To new beginnings and old friends. May this be the first of many adventures together. They clinked glasses as my world tilted on its axis. New beginnings? First of many adventures? This wasn't just an affair. It was the start of something they intended to continue. Something they had apparently been planning, after all this time. I pushed back from our table abruptly. I need air, I gasped, heading for the exit before Diane could respond. On the promenade deck, I gripped the railing, gulping the salty evening air as the reality of what I'd witnessed settled over me. Mark wasn't just cheating. He was building a parallel life, one that excluded me so completely he felt comfortable displaying his relationship publicly, among friends, without fear of discovery. Diane appeared beside me, her expression concerned. Talk to me, Pamela. What are you thinking? I'm thinking our marriage is even more of a sham than I realized, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. This isn't just sex or infatuation. He has a relationship with her, established, comfortable, public. So what's your next move? I turned to face my friend, decision crystallizing. I'm done watching from the shadows. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to confront him. Alone. Are you sure that's wise? I could be there for support. I appreciate that more than I can say, I interrupted gently. But this is between Mark and me. 12 years of marriage deserves a private reckoning. Back in my suite, I spent hours planning exactly how the confrontation would unfold. The ship's app showed a cafe on the promenade deck that opened at 6 a.m. Earlier than most passengers would be active, especially those celebrating late into the night. Mark had always been an early riser, often getting up at 5:30 for a morning workout even on weekends. Some habits, I hoped, remained consistent even in betrayal. I laid out my clothes for the morning. Casual but put together, nothing that suggested the emotional turmoil beneath. As I finally drifted toward uneasy sleep, I realized something unexpected. Beneath my hurt and anger lay a strange relief. After tomorrow, regardless of the outcome, the limbo of suspicion and pretense would end. I would know exactly where I stood, and what my future held. What Mark couldn't possibly anticipate as he slept beside his mistress that night was that his carefully constructed alternate life was hours away from colliding with reality. While he dreamed of Caribbean adventures with Ella, I was setting my alarm for 5:30 a.m., preparing to become his worst nightmare. The wife who refused to remain conveniently ignorant, who had followed him across the ocean to reclaim her dignity and perhaps her future. The ocean majesty was eerily quiet at 5:45 a.m. I sat at a corner table in the Shoreline Cafe, a steaming cup of coffee warming my hands, as I watched the eastern horizon lighten with approaching dawn. The ship moved smoothly through calm seas, most passengers still asleep after the previous night's festivities. My heart pounded erratically as I rehearsed the opening lines I'd practiced throughout the night. I wasn't sure what I hoped to achieve. Closure, explanation, apology? The fantasy of Mark begging forgiveness seemed hollow now that I'd witnessed the easy intimacy between him and Ella. Some betrayals run too deep for simple reconciliation. At precisely 6:07 a.m., I checked my watch compulsively. Mark appeared at the cafe entrance. He wore athletic shorts and a t-shirt from his alumni gym, earbuds in place, clearly headed for the ship's fitness center after a quick caffeine boost. His routine, at least, remained predictable. He didn't notice me as he ordered from the barista, his back to my corner table. I studied him, this familiar stranger, noting the relaxed set of his shoulders, the easy smile he offered the staff. He looked unburdened, younger somehow. Was this who he truly was when freed from the constraints of our marriage? The barista handed him a large black coffee, his preference for over a decade. Some things hadn't changed then. Small comfort. As he turned to leave, coffee in hand, I spoke. Just his name. Mark. He froze, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim of his cup. Slowly, disbelievingly, he turned toward my voice. The color drained from his face. Pamela? What, how? Surprise, I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. Mind joining me for a moment? He approached my table as if moving through a nightmare, eyes darting around the nearly empty cafe. What are you doing here? He finally managed, remaining standing. I think that's my question, I replied. Since you're supposed to be at a financial conference in Chicago, not on a Caribbean cruise with your girlfriend. She's not, he began then stopped. This isn't. Please spare me the immediate denials, I interrupted. I saw you with her last night. I saw you kiss her. I heard your toast to new beginnings. He sank into the chair opposite me, setting down his coffee with a trembling hand. How did you find out? How did you get here? You left your iPad logged into your email. Not very careful for a man leading a double life. I took a sip of my coffee, surprising myself with this performance of calm. As for how I got here, the same way you did. Booked a cabin, packed a suitcase, boarded the ship. Mark ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. Pamela, I can explain. Can you? Can you really explain maintaining a relationship so established that you're comfortable taking a luxury cruise together? Or introducing her to your friends, as if she's a legitimate part of your life? Or kissing her in public without the slightest concern that you might be recognized? He flinched at each question, the reality of his exposure sinking in. It's complicated. I'm sure it is. Affairs usually are. I leaned forward, maintaining eye contact despite my churning stomach. How long, Mark? How long have you been lying to my face? He hesitated, calculation visible in his expression. I could almost see him measuring how much to admit, how much I might already know. The truth, I insisted. For once. Almost 2 years, he finally admitted, his voice low. But it wasn't planned. It just happened. 2 years. Half of our last mortgage. Countless anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, all celebrated while he maintained a parallel relationship. I struggled to breathe evenly as the timeline sank in. Who is she? Ella Peterson. She's an investment advisor at Meridian Capital, a competitor to Mark's firm. How did you meet? Industry conference in New York. We were on the same panel. Each answer came reluctantly, as if extracted under duress. I continued my interrogation, gathering the pieces of the life he'd hidden from me. Does she know about me? At this, he had the grace to look ashamed. Yes. From the beginning. And she was fine being the other woman? It wasn't like that, he insisted. It wasn't just about sex or excitement. We connected intellectually, professionally. She understands parts of my life that you. Don't you dare, I interrupted, my composed facade cracking slightly. Don't you dare imply that your affair is somehow my failure to understand you. He backpedaled quickly. That's not what I meant. I'm just trying to explain that it wasn't a casual fling. No, clearly not. You've built an entire relationship alongside our marriage. I took another sip of coffee, using the moment to steady myself. Were you ever going to tell me? Or just keep juggling both lives indefinitely? Mark stared down at his untouched coffee. I've been trying to find the right time, the right way. I didn't want to hurt you. A laugh escaped me, brittle and sharp. How considerate. Planning a secret vacation with your mistress while maintaining our marriage. Truly the act of a man concerned about his wife's feelings. That's not fair. Fair. I repeated incredulously. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair to waste years of my life in a marriage you'd already abandoned? To let me believe we had a future while you were planning one with someone else? Other early risers had begun filtering into the cafe, casting curious glances at our increasingly tense conversation. Mark shifted uncomfortably, clearly concerned about creating a scene. Can we go somewhere more private to discuss this? He suggested. Why? Worried about your reputation? That ship sailed when you booked this cruise, I replied, but stood anyway. This conversation deserved more privacy than a public cafe could provide. We walked in strained silence to the promenade deck, the rising sun casting long shadows across the polished wood. The ocean stretched endlessly around us, a vast emptiness that mirrored the growing chasm between us. What happens now? Mark finally asked as we leaned against the railing, a careful distance separating us. It was the question I'd been asking myself for weeks, through sleepless nights and tear-stained mornings. What did I want from this confrontation? Reconciliation seemed impossible given the depth and duration of his deception. Revenge would be temporarily satisfying but ultimately hollow. I want a divorce, I said, the words emerging with surprising clarity. I want to stop wasting my life with someone who doesn't truly want me. He nodded slowly, not arguing or appearing particularly surprised. Had he been expecting this outcome all along? Had our confrontation simply accelerated his own plans? I'm sorry, he offered, the words insufficient against the magnitude of his betrayal. I never meant for things to end this way. How did you think they would end? What was your plan? Mark hesitated. After this trip, I was going to tell you everything. Ask for a divorce. Try to do it as amicably as possible. The cruise wasn't just a vacation. It was a final fling before ending our marriage. The realization settled over me like a physical weight. So I've just accelerated your timeline, I observed, a strange calm displacing my earlier turmoil. Saved you the trouble of figuring out how to break it to me. Pamela, please understand. I do understand, I interrupted. Perfectly. You outgrew our marriage but lacked the courage to end it honestly. Instead, you built a parallel life that gave you everything you wanted without the inconvenience of facing the consequences of your choices. He didn't deny it, which was perhaps the only honesty between us now. When we return to Boston, I'll move out immediately, he said after a long pause. You can keep the house until we sort through the details. How generous of you, I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. And what about this week? Do we just awkwardly avoid each other on a ship with limited space? Mark shifted uncomfortably. I didn't expect to be navigating this situation during what was supposed to be a romantic getaway with your girlfriend? Yes, I imagine my presence is inconvenient. The sun had fully risen now, casting a golden glow across the water. Other passengers had begun to appear on the deck, enjoying the spectacular morning views. Our private moment was ending, the real world intruding on our painful reckoning. "I should go," Mark said, glancing at his watch. "Ella will be wondering where I am." Of course. His first concern was for her feelings, her expectations. I had become the complication in his real life, rather than the other way around. "Go then," I said, turning to face the ocean rather than watch him leave. "We have nothing more to say to each other." I felt rather than saw his hesitation, the weight of 12 years creating a momentary gravity between us. Then his footsteps retreated, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. Alone at the railing, I watched the endless horizon where sky met ocean in a seamless blue expanse. Tears finally came, not the violent sobs I had expected but quiet, cleansing drops that fell into the wake behind us. I was mourning not just the end of my marriage but the death of a future I had believed in. Children we might have had. Anniversaries we would have celebrated. A retirement spent reminiscing over a life built together. All gone now. Dissolved like salt in the vast ocean surrounding us. Diane found me there an hour later, still watching the wake as if it might contain answers to questions I hadn't yet formulated. "You confronted him," she said, not a question but an observation. I nodded. "It's over. All of it." She leaned against the railing beside me, her solid presence a comfort in my untethered state. "What do you want to do? We could get off at the first port, fly home." "No," I interrupted, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I paid for this cruise. I'm going to enjoy it." Diane studied my face, perhaps looking for signs of denial or shock. "Are you sure?" "Completely." I turned to face her, drawing myself upright. Mark doesn't get to steal this experience from me too. I refuse to slink away in shame while he enjoys a romantic vacation. This ship is big enough for both of us. A slow smile spread across her face. "That's my girl. Operation Reclamation begins now." What Mark didn't realize as he returned to Ella's waiting arms was that his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, wasn't leaving the ship in humiliated retreat. Instead, I was about to embark on my own journey of discovery, one that would transform me in ways neither of us could have anticipated. The cruise he had planned as his gateway to a new life was about to become mine instead. Specialty restaurant reservations, spa appointments, shore excursions. Diane read from the ship's app as we reclined by the adults-only pool. "If we're doing this properly, we're going all out." It was our second day at sea. After the confrontation with Mark, I'd returned to my suite and slept for 6 solid hours, my body and mind exhausted from weeks of anxiety and the final emotional showdown. When I awoke, something had shifted inside me, a strange lightness, as if I'd set down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for years. "Book everything," I agreed, sipping a tropical concoction that sparkled in the afternoon sun. "I want the full luxury experience." We'd chosen this particular pool strategically, located on the opposite end of the ship from the main pool area where we'd spotted Mark and his group the previous day. The ocean majesty was large enough to maintain comfortable distance if one was deliberate about it. "Parasailing in St. Thomas?" Diane suggested, scrolling through excursion options. "You always said you wanted to try it." I had mentioned that desire to Mark years ago during a beach vacation. He'd dismissed it as too risky, too expensive. Just one of many small dreams deferred in the name of practicality or compromise. Absolutely. And the rainforest hike in Puerto Rico. And swimming with dolphins in the Bahamas. Diane glanced up from her tablet, her expression softening. "I know you're putting on a brave face. It's okay if you're not actually ready for all this." I considered her observation, examining my own emotions with newfound clarity. I'm not just being defiant or distracted. For the first time in years I feel liberated, like I've been unconsciously constraining myself to fit within the boundaries of Mark's expectations. "You have changed," she acknowledged. "Even before this trip. The haircut, the new clothes. It's like you've been emerging from a chrysalis." Perhaps she was right. The discovery of Mark's betrayal had cracked something open inside me. Not just my heart, but a shell of complacency I hadn't recognized was there. Each decision since then, from investigating his deception to confronting him directly, had been an act of reclaiming my agency. Our conversation paused as a server approached with fresh drinks. As he set them on our table, I noticed a familiar figure entering the pool area. Ella, Mark's mistress, alone for the first time since I'd spotted her. She wore an elegant cover-up over a swimsuit, her long dark hair pulled into a casual knot. 3 o'clock, I murmured to Diane. Ella just arrived. Diane turned subtly, assessing. What do you want to do? Leave. I considered the question, watching as Ella selected a lounger and arranged her belongings. No, I'm not hiding. Are you going to confront her too? I don't know yet, I replied honestly. Let's see what happens. We returned to our conversation, though my awareness of Ella's presence remained acute. After about 20 minutes, she rose and walked to the pool bar, a path that would take her directly past our loungers. As she approached, something prompted me to speak. Ella. She stopped abruptly, confusion crossing her features before recognition dawned. You're Pamela. I am, I confirmed, maintaining steady eye contact. She glanced around nervously. Mark told me about this morning. About your conversation. I imagine he did. I gestured to the empty chair beside us. Would you like to join us for a moment? Diane shot me a questioning look, which I answered with a slight nod. This wasn't part of any plan we'd discussed, but something inside me needed this conversation. Ella hesitated before perching uncomfortably on the offered seat. Up close, she was even more striking. Naturally beautiful with intelligent eyes and an air of competence that contrasted with the mistress stereotype. I suppose you hate me, she began, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I don't know you well enough to hate you, I replied honestly, though I won't pretend I'm thrilled about your relationship with my husband. She flinched slightly at the word husband, her discomfort evident. He said you're getting a divorce. Yes. That seems the only reasonable response to discovering your spouse has been living a double life for 2 years. Ella had the grace to look ashamed. I know how this must seem to you. Do you? I interrupted, keeping my voice level despite the emotions churning beneath. Do you know what it's like to discover that your entire reality was a carefully constructed illusion? That the person you trusted most was systematically lying to your face? That years of your life were essentially stolen from you? She stared down at her hands. No, I don't. And I'm sorry for my part in causing you pain. Truly. The sincerity in her voice was unexpected. I had anticipated defensiveness, perhaps hostility or competitive smugness. Her evident remorse disarmed me slightly. Why? I asked simply. Why become involved with a married man? You're obviously intelligent, successful, attractive. You could have had anyone. Ella seemed to consider her answer carefully. When I met Mark, I was coming out of a devastating breakup. He was kind, attentive, understood my work in a way few men do. She paused. He told me his marriage was essentially over. That you lived separate lives, stayed together out of habit and convenience. The familiar script of the unfaithful spouse. I wondered how much she had questioned his portrayal of our marriage. And you believed him. I observed. Not a question but a statement. I wanted to, she admitted. By the time I realized the situation was more complicated than he'd described, I was already deeply involved. In love, or what I thought was love. Diane, who had remained silently protective beside me, spoke up. Did you ever consider that if he could lie so extensively to his wife, he could just as easily be lying to you? Ella's eyes flicked to her, then back to me. Recently, yes. Especially seeing how blindsided you were by all this. It made me question what else might not be as he presented. An interesting admission, cracks in her confidence about Mark's character. I found myself curious rather than vindictive. What's your plan now? I asked. After the cruise, after the divorce? She seemed surprised by the question. We've talked about moving in together once everything is settled. Starting fresh. I nodded, a strange sense of clarity washing over me. I hope it works out for you. Truly. But my advice, for whatever it's worth, don't trust someone who's proven they're capable of sustained deception. People who compartmentalize their lives so effectively rarely change that fundamental pattern. Ella absorbed this, conflict evident in her expression. She started to respond but was interrupted by the arrival of a familiar figure. Pamela. Mark stood frozen several feet away, his expression cycling rapidly through shock, anger, and alarm as he took in the tableau before him. His wife and mistress engaged in civil conversation while his wife's best friend watched protectively. Mark, Ella acknowledged, standing quickly. I was just. What are you doing? He demanded, directing his question at me rather than her. Is this some kind of ambush? Hardly, I replied calmly. Just two women having an honest conversation, something you might want to try sometime. His face flushed with anger. You had no right to approach her. Actually, I approached Pamela, Ella corrected, surprising both of us. And I'm glad I did. We needed to clear the air. Mark looked between us, clearly unsettled by this unexpected alliance. We should go, he told Ella, reaching for her arm. She hesitated, then turned to me. I am sorry, Pamela. For everything. I nodded acknowledgement, watching as they walked away. Mark's posture rigid with contained fury, Ella maintaining a noticeable distance between them. Well. Diane exhaled once they were out of earshot. That was unexpected. Yes. I agreed, trying to process my own reactions. It was. Are you okay? That had to be intense. I considered the question carefully. Strangely, I feel lighter. Seeing them together, talking to her directly, it made everything real in a way that was actually helpful. Not just a nightmare scenario I've been imagining. She seemed genuinely remorseful, Diane observed. She did, I agreed. And trapped in her own way. I almost feel sorry for her. Sorry for the woman sleeping with your husband? Diane raised an eyebrow. Not exactly. But I recognize the position she's in. Having built a relationship on a foundation of lies, now questioning everything. I shook my head slightly. In some ways, she's just another victim of Mark's selfishness. Diane studied me for a moment. You're handling this with remarkable grace. Not grace, I corrected. Perspective. I'm starting to see that losing Mark isn't the tragedy I initially thought. Maybe it's an opportunity one never knew I needed. The remainder of the cruise unfolded in unexpected ways. Rather than hiding from potential encounters with Mark and Ella, I moved through the ship with newfound confidence. We crossed paths occasionally, in restaurants, at evening shows, during port calls, each meeting less charged than the last as we established an unspoken détente. I threw myself into experiences I'd always wanted to try, but had somehow never prioritized. I parasailed above the crystal waters of St. Thomas, feeling weightless and exhilarated as the tropical landscape spread beneath me. I hiked through the lush rainforest of El Yunque in Puerto Rico, the primal sounds and scents awakening something long dormant inside me. I swam with dolphins in the Bahamas, their sleek bodies and intelligent eyes reminding me of the joy of pure, present moment living. Each night, I returned to my suite physically tired but mentally invigorated, sleeping more soundly than I had in months. The ship became a transitional space between my old life and whatever awaited me. A floating limbo where I could experiment with new identities, new pleasures, new perspectives. On our final evening at sea, Diane and I had reservations at the ship's most exclusive restaurant, a glass-enclosed space at the bow offering panoramic ocean views, and a renowned tasting menu. To your rebirth, Diane toasted, raising her champagne flute as the sunset painted the sky in spectacular oranges and pinks. The phoenix rising from the ashes of a marriage that never deserved you. I clinked my glass against hers. And to friendship that never wavers. Even when following your best friend onto a cruise ship to confront her cheating husband sounds completely insane. We laughed together, the sound genuine and unfettered. As our laughter subsided, I noticed Mark and Ella being seated at a table across the restaurant. Another couple joining them whom I didn't recognize. Do you want to leave? Diane asked, following my gaze. No, I replied confidently. This restaurant has the best reviews on the ship, and I've been looking forward to this meal all week. We enjoyed our dinner despite, or perhaps because of, the symbolism of occupying the same space while moving in completely different orbits. As dessert was served, I noticed Ella excuse herself from their table, heading toward the restrooms. On impulse I followed. We found ourselves alone at the elegant marble sinks, our eyes meeting in the mirror's reflection. I didn't thank you properly, I said, breaking the silence, for your honesty the other day. She looked surprised. You don't owe me any thanks. Perhaps not, but I appreciate it nonetheless. I applied fresh lipstick with a steady hand. I meant what I said, you know, about being careful with Mark. Ella's reflection showed conflicting emotions. I've been thinking about that a lot this week. Watching him with you. How easily he navigates between worlds. It's been enlightening. Trust that enlightenment, I advised. It's telling you something important. She nodded slowly. Your response to all this has been remarkable. I expected hatred, public scenes, vindictiveness. So did I admitted with a small smile. But I discovered something unexpected when I confronted Mark. I'm no longer in love with the man he's become. Perhaps I haven't been for longer than I realized. This wasn't something I'd articulated even to Diane, but as the words emerged, I recognized their truth. The grief I'd anticipated feeling throughout this cruise had been largely absent, replaced instead by a sense of liberation and possibility. What will you do now? Ella asked. After the divorce? Live. I replied simply. On my own terms, following my own desires rather than constraining myself to fit someone else's expectations. I turned to face her directly. What about you? She hesitated, vulnerability evident in her expression. I don't know anymore. Everything seemed so clear before this week. I recognized the uncertainty in her eyes, the questioning of foundations, the reevaluation of choices. I'd seen it in my own reflection these past weeks. For what it's worth, I said, moving toward the door. Clarity often comes after everything falls apart. Sometimes we need to lose our certainties before we can find our truth. As I returned to the table where Diane waited, I felt a profound shift in my understanding of the week's events. I had boarded this ship seeking answers, confirmation, perhaps even revenge. Instead, I'd found something far more valuable, myself, or at least the beginning outlines of who I might become without the constraints of a marriage built on deception. The next morning, as the Ocean Majesty docked in Miami and passengers prepared for disembarkation, I stood on my private balcony watching the shoreline draw closer. The woman who would walk off this ship bore little resemblance to the one who had boarded it 7 days earlier. Not just in appearance but in fundamental orientation to life. Diane joined me, handing me a cup of coffee. Ready to go home? Yes, I replied. But not to the home I left. I'm putting the house on the market as soon as possible. Too many memories, too many lies embedded in those walls. You can stay with me as long as you need, she offered immediately. Just temporarily. I've been thinking about that waterfront condo building we passed on our walk last month. The one with the rooftop garden and the arts center on the ground floor. Diane's eyes widened. Those are expensive. I have savings. And after the divorce settlement. I shrugged. Besides, I'm considering a career change. Maybe educational consulting or curriculum development. Something that uses my teaching experience, but offers more flexibility, more creativity. Look at you, Diane marveled. A week ago you were devastated by Mark's betrayal, and now you're planning a complete life overhaul. I smiled, watching seagulls wheel above the harbor. The betrayal was devastating, but it also freed me from trying to salvage something that wasn't working, that perhaps hadn't been working for years before Ella ever entered the picture. The ship's horn sounded, announcing our final approach to the dock. Soon we would disembark, return to Boston, begin the practical dismantling of the life I had shared with Mark. Legal documents, property divisions, notifications to friends and family. The process would be painful, no doubt, but no longer devastating. As we prepared to leave our suite, my phone chimed with a message notification. Mark, we need to discuss logistics for when we return. Can we meet next week? I stared at the message, considering my response. The old Pamela might have accommodated his request immediately, rearranging her schedule to minimize his inconvenience. The new Pamela had different priorities. I'll have my lawyer contact yours, I typed back. I'll be busy settling into my new life. As we joined the disembarkation queue, I caught a glimpse of Mark and Ella several lines over. Their body language had changed subtly, A new distance between them. A tension that hadn't been there before. I felt no satisfaction in this observation. Only a quiet certainty that we were all exactly where we needed to be. In transition, in truth, in transformation. You know what's ironic? I commented to Diane as we finally stepped onto solid ground. Mark booked this cruise as an escape, a fantasy separate from real life. For me, it turned out to be the opposite. The place where I finally faced reality and found freedom in it. Diane linked her arm through mine as we headed toward the terminal. The best revenge isn't just living well. It's living authentically. And you, my friend, are already winning. What Mark never anticipated when he planned his secret getaway was that the cruise would become a catalyst not for his new beginning, but for mine. While he returned to face the consequences of his deception, I disembarked transformed, no longer defined by his betrayal but by my own resilience, no longer mourning what was lost but embracing what was possible, no longer his deceived wife but entirely, gloriously myself.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.